Addressing communication disorders in culturally diverse populations. The importance of cultural awareness in speech therapy, as Dr. Manny Scott once said, your normal is not everyone else's normal. And I believe this mindset is imperative to providing the best care we can for our clients. Cultural awareness in speech therapy allows us to have a better understanding of how to interact and communicate with others. It is important to first understand our own beliefs and our culture identities and biases before we can understand others. Having sufficient knowledge of other backgrounds will help you avoid making assumptions on communication patterns and misdiagnosing the patterns when they may just be cultural differences. Culture plays a huge role in communication styles. Knowing whether a culture is a high context culture or low context culture can help you understand how to interpret someone's words or body language. In a high context culture, you may ask a question and they may say, sure, because in their culture, being direct and saying no is not appropriate. And so you may take that, sure, as yeah, go ahead. And so when you do whatever that thing is that you asked, they may be really put off by it because they really meant no, but you read it as, yeah, go ahead. Different cultures across the world have different communication styles, different assumptions and norms when it comes to communicating. What we say, how we say them, when you say them, and what that all means. Without knowing the previous knowledge of culture norms, it's easy to misinterpret things and have a communication barrier. The difference in verbal and nonverbal communication varies around the world. In some cultures, it is polite to stand very close to someone when you are speaking. In the American culture, we generally tend to lead with more personal space. So it's important to know what culture you're dealing with and how they're going to interpret your space, because they might take that as, oh, they're mad at me, they don't like me, something's wrong, where in their culture, being very close is a sign of respect. Another important nonverbal verbal communication difference that is important is in some cultures, making eye contact is not normal. And so as an American, you make eye contact when you are speaking with someone. So it's important to know when you're dealing with a client and understanding why they aren't making eye contact with you. Language is a core component of culture, and when trying to consider a dialect versus a speech disorder, it's important to look at what is typical for like peers of the same background, the same community. It wouldn't be fair to compare someone in different cultures and try and diagnose them that way. When considering cultural stigma surrounding speech and language disorders, it is important to know that a speech and language disorder is not a value of intelligence. For example, my 4-year-old son, who receives speech services for articulation, is very actually advanced in his sentence lengths. And so I believe that when people listen to him talk and they can't understand him, they have this idea of, oh, he's not smart. I often used to feel embarrassed telling people my kids were in speech therapy. I would think to myself, are they going to think that it was something I did? Was I good enough? Did I not do enough? Was it my fault? And this is what stigma does to people. It makes whatever the circumstance be feel embarrassing. And knowing that no one chooses to have a disorder or an illness can help us overcome the stigma around them. We need to understand that most standardized testing is not created with everyone in mind. For example, second language learners. And then we must tailor our assessment to meet our demographic needs, considering the cultural factors when setting goals, therapy techniques, and designing treatment plans that are culturally relevant. Understanding the culture of our clients is important in regards to using the right approach. Using a mismatched therapy approach can lead to misunderstanding. Misunderstanding a client's silence as resistance when it may actually just be culturally appropriate and a sign of respect. Knowing that in some cultures they value family decision-making, and knowing that when creating goals to include the family in those decisions. Having culturally appropriate materials can improve a student's involvement, support their written and oral language development, reading comprehension, So when you don't have those things, we can see a detrimental impact on the progress. Having books and materials that students can see themselves in can help foster a sense of belonging and help support identity. Being able to know what the family expects from your therapy sessions and what type of progress reports do they expect, how do they want those communicated, how involved do they want to be in therapy, and setting clear expectations about those goals, and understanding that some cultures don't value more communication from a child. The first thing we can do as a speech-language pathologist assistant is understanding the barriers in place for everyone to receive services they need. Understanding different economic statuses, transportation. Are they going to be able to take time off work to bring their child to services if they aren't in a school setting? How can we meet people where they need to be, and what can we do to get them those services that they need and give them the accommodations that they deserve? Creating a culturally competent assessment involves asking open-ended questions, utilizing culture checklists, utilizing interpreters when needed. In order to collaborate with interpreters, you must first learn about your client's culture to find the right interpreter that matches their beliefs. Incorporating a client's cultural background into therapy and their goals can help the overall outcome. In some cultures, they take their shoes off in the house, and having this knowledge will help you understand their need to take their shoes off during your sessions and help them feel more comfortable. Understanding cultural differences and beliefs and trying to incorporate those into your goals. While educating families on communication disorders while expecting their beliefs, it's important to remember that some cultures value formality while others value humor, friendship, and more informal approaches. Cultural differences shape language, style, and understanding. Families' cultural and language is important to know when adjusting your communication style with the family. It's important to consider cultural beliefs when diagnosing. For example, in Finland, they prefer not to make small talk and they're more comfortable with silence. So this could often be misdiagnosed as a child who is delayed. And another example is African American English. If that style of speaking is unfamiliar to a clinician, they are often overlooked and misdiagnosed as a disorder, as they often delete sounds and use specific grammatical structure when speaking. The way we seek to understand and learn more about cultures is often limited to online videos, and it should not be assumed that the client's native language is the dominant language when assessing. To successfully culturally adapt therapy strategies, it is important to maintain cultural competence, understanding the culture and including culturally appropriate materials to therapy sessions. To adapt to a Spanish-speaking child, it may be useful to teach verbs first, as verbs are typically produced first in Spanish-speaking languages, compared to English, where we typically learn nouns first. We can teach words with similar translations to start, like elephant has a similar translation in Spanish and English. It's also important to understand that each language has different dialects, and it's imperative to take into consideration the dialect of the client when conducting an assessment and intervention processes. Creating unique and individualized therapy for each individual will help each individual get the therapy they need. It can reduce the child being misdiagnosed due to cultural differences. Cultural competence is evolving, and the best thing we can do is continue learning, asking questions, and seek training.